Since you have your questions, and that's great. Since I didn't get to talk at the rally yesterday, I mean, it wasn't my rally, I understand, but I thought I might. I wonder if I could just start off with a few thoughts that will probably overlap with and to some extent may answer, but anyway, connect with your questions. Had I had a chance to say something there, again, no implication that I should have been given that chance. I would have wanted to make a couple of points. First, that the rally itself is a wonderful example of the energy and engagement that makes this, maybe in some ways a crisis, but also a very special opportunity at Ithaca College to make a difference on a long-standing issue. I'm sorry, I just have to ask, am I okay? Okay, I wasn't sure if there was something I needed to do. On a long-standing issue at the college around racism and other aspects of bias that make us a less than fully inclusive community. And I appreciate the commitment that students and others have made to organize, to speak, to come together. The second point I would have wanted to make is that I believe that the opportunity for change will be realized to the extent we're all working together on this and that we have an awareness of the opportunity to work together. The engagement is not just happening at rallies, it's happening in classrooms around the college right now. It's happening through a great number of individual and small group conversations, some of which I'm a part of, some of which I'm not a part of. But there is a real focusing of energy to talk about issues that are often swept under the rug because they can be uncomfortable to talk about, and it creates an enormous opportunity. Unite that opportunity with the action plan that we've created, and which I will always regard as a draft action plan because it will be constantly updated and revised as we understand, first of all, as we get observations and insight from people, but in addition, as we understand what works to a greater extent and what's working to a lesser extent, because the action plan is not about those steps. The action plan is about altering the climate and giving people the capacity to better understand and work with what is an increasingly diverse campus community. And the final point that I would have wanted to make is that I'm personally committed to working through this process and these issues and making a difference at Ithaca College, which means, and addressing directly one of the demands made at the rally. I am in this and I'm committed. I love this college. I recognize the depth of the problems we have right now, and I believe that I can, not by myself, this is where actually the rally people and I kind of differ, I think, in our understanding, but together with a large number of people in the campus community, we can make a difference.
Well, thank you. We've actually been wanting to hear a little bit more of your side of it, so I'm glad that you took the initiative to kind of open up with that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I guess we'll just go on to the questions as we kind of thought of them. A lot of these have to do with, obviously, what's going on right now and the big protests and everything else that happened yesterday. But to start off with, the magnitude and the intensity of these protests are pretty much unprecedented for this campus. I know I'm a senior and there were protests last semester and they were never this large as the one yesterday, and even our advisor has said when the student media policy was being protested and when there was Erase the Hate, things were never as big as they are now. So we just want to hear from you, why do you believe such a large segment of faculty and students have kind of come together about these issues?
Well, I need to say this in a nuanced way, and I hope you will take both halves of the thought, because this is about Ithaca College, and I don't want to deflect that or seem to minimize that, but it is also about what's going on in this country right now, and it is about the Black Lives Matter movement. It is about a sense that as a country we've reached a turning point where we just have to do something differently and we have to engage with each other in a different way. And I do not say that to deflect anything away from Ithaca College and the incidents that we've had on our campus. But it is also a national movement around college and university campuses, and there is a reason for that. Our Ithaca College issues and incidents have been, they're deeply troubling, and they stand on their own, as that there are enough evidence right there that we should be engaging. But I think we miss the picture if we don't see the bigger picture. And indeed, that's where the rally opened yesterday. There is a national problem, it is a systemic problem. I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, what do you think are the most pressing issues on this campus specifically? Because it is, like you said, about the national movement, but also about Ithaca.
Well, it's about inclusivity and the climate. I'm again kind of fully in agreement with what I see as the primary focus of the rallies that have been held. The testimony around daily interactions, student to student, faculty to student, staff to student, is sufficient testimony, more than sufficient testimony that we fail to create the climate, the environment in which all students can feel fully at home and fully able to take advantage of the educational opportunities that are offered. You can't be sort of open-hearted in embracing the educational opportunity if you're angry and you don't feel that you are accepted or respected as an individual by the people around you.
I guess, why do you think, this is the follow-up question, why do you think that is, that Ithaca College, you had said, is kind of, I think you used the word failing to address that sense of inclusivity up to this point? I don't mean that in any sort of malicious intent.
No, that's what I said, and I mean that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can think of two things to say. I mean, one is we're part of our wider society and our wider culture, and we reflect those misunderstandings and fears and biases and so forth. In addition, and much more specific to Ithaca College, our percentage of underrepresented students has almost doubled in the last 7 years, from 11% when I arrived to 20% today. That is a very big shift. Our faculty and staff percentage of people of color has shifted much less. Not surprising, we have 25% new students every year, but only 4 or 5% new staff or faculty, so change will occur much more slowly there. But that creates an increasing disconnect between the student body and their expectations and their needs and the faculty and staff. It's a disconnect that could be bridged if we had been, over the last years, more attentive to the cultural changes that we need to, in order to be fully inclusive, if we had been doing some of the things that we are now starting to do, but we weren't. And now is the time, is sort of being forward-looking, now is the time to do those things and start recognizing that Ithaca College has a different present than its past, and the future will be different still more.
So why do you think the discussion of these issues has become so focused on you and your removal from the office of president as being a significant step to addressing these issues?
I don't know the answer to that question and wish I understood it better. I do want to say I just couldn't disagree more with that part of the analysis. Our culture is composed of every interaction among students, staff, faculty that happens, millions of interactions that happen every single day, and the assumptions and the biases that underlie those interactions. One person does not change that. Now leadership has responsibilities, and leadership has ultimate accountability, but it would change so little, in my view, to change who is the president without changing anything else. Far more powerful to change a lot of other things, which is why my sole focus right now is what can we do to take advantage of this moment and make a real difference for the campus.
Okay. I'd say a lot of the major concerns that the campus has kind of divides into different categories. The one is the community's concerns over the racial climate, obviously, and the administration's failure to address those concerns, which you touched on before, and the faculty concerns over the academic direction of the college. Now our question is, what have you done to address those two issues up to that point, and do you think that that's enough so far?
Do I think what I've done so far is enough? Well, we do need to start from an understanding that these are two very different sets of issues, and they can't really be talked about together. Since we've been talking about diversity and inclusion so far, maybe what you're really doing in a way is inviting me to talk a little bit about faculty and consultation and governance and so forth. This has been academically also a period of rapid change for Ithaca College. It's a period in which many people believe we've entered a period in which the very kind of organizational foundations of colleges is changing. Online technology makes different things possible. The role of faculty relating to students is different than in the days when students had to go to a class to hear a lecture in order to get information. That was the only way they could get that information. So at Ithaca College and everywhere else, we have to ask very basic questions about how can we provide the richest possible educational experience for students. And we need to be asking those questions together. Administration, maybe its role is to kind of pose the questions in order to kind of stimulate some creative thinking, but faculty have to do the creative thinking. We're not where I would like us to be in terms of collaboration on that, and some faculty would probably rather not address the issue in ways very parallel to some people would rather not recognize a diversity and inclusion problem on campus. So when there is change and when we do address those issues, it does create some tensions. I think those tensions can be managed through respectful dialogue and a determination to continue the tradition of excellence at Ithaca College, but to evolve. But we do need to do more in communication on that front too.
All right. So our next question is more about, a little bit about Roger Richardson. So as the Associate Provost for Diversity, Inclusion, and Engagement, Dr. Roger Richardson is the highest ranking administrator responsible for diversity issues at this college.
Yes.
Yet from what we've observed and what we've heard some other people kind of observing is that he's been largely invisible, is the word people have given it, during public discussions about these issues throughout the protests and everything else, and through the administration's response. Obviously at the A&E Center event, he wasn't on stage during that, which some people found confusing because of his title. And that led to, as you know, the comment about 5 white guys as well. And now we hear the college is making a new chief diversity officer position, and Roger Richardson is taking that on an interim when his position is already about diversity and inclusion. So how is that working? Where does he fit in all of this?
Got it, and I understand the confusion. So let me back up to something about the white guys on the stage first. It's a little bit of a parenthetical, but I do. That's an observation that's been made, of course, and I do feel it's important to address. And then let me come back to Dr. Richardson. When we were planning that event, we started with as you know, the President's Council is more diverse than what you saw on the stage. And we started as a President's Council along with the 3 governance body heads, SGA, Faculty Council, Staff Council, just brainstorming and developing the action steps. We then got to the point where we looked at the action steps and we asked, how should these be presented to the campus community? It didn't seem like I should do it all, because then it would sound like it was my plan and everyone was buying in. So what we decided to do was have people participate in rolling out the action steps that most related to their constituency, treating them with professional respect. And to be very explicit about one example of that, when I hired Gerald Hector, I told him, you are a very, very highly qualified professional. You are going to be the CFO at Ithaca College. You are not going to be the black CFO. And it was a commitment we made to each other, and I've never used him in any other way. And it's important to me personally, even when there's public criticism around some of the things that follow from that.
And before you go on, just to reiterate, in fact, because I think that is the point that a lot of people had with it, is from the audience's perspective, there was a sense that it just wasn't thought about. But you're saying those conversations were had and that was brought up.
Yes, and my personal sense of integrity and how I would like to treat people with respect meant that I didn't want to look a colleague in the eye and say, I would like you on the stage because of your skin color. And let's make it look good by having you read a slide. I didn't want to go there. But yes, we talked about it. So you raised a question around Dr. Richardson. And first I need to say something about the Associate Provost for Diversity, Inclusion, and Engagement. That is part of the Provost's office, which has oversight responsibility for academic affairs and student affairs, not for the entire college. And that's a very important piece of background information for a couple of things. First of all, how is that different from a chief diversity officer who's going to have responsibility for everything related to diversity around the entire college? And secondly, if it's so why was he not on the stage? Because we didn't have anything that was about the sort of faculty and student life and so forth, where he would be the logical person to say, I'm responsible for this piece. A chief diversity officer would have been on the stage. In fact, maybe would have been in my role in a sense as the main presenter, although certainly I would have needed to be involved. Dr. Richardson's understanding of his role as associate provost has been very much an understanding of background facilitator. He has worked really hard this fall on issues such as bringing together the RAs and public safety officers and having dialogue. And that's been a longer and more intensive set of conversations than you might ever imagine to make real progress on that, and I believe we have made real progress on that. His role as Chief Diversity Officer will not be to be in the background. He fully understands that, and I was grateful that he accepted this position on an interim basis so we could get started. This is a slight simplification, but the chief element of that role right now will be to have project oversight for all of those action steps that we've laid out. It's a very ambitious plan. It touches every aspect of the college, and there's no one organization or office today that would have the ability to coordinate all of those things. Rather than asking a bunch of people to come together in meetings all the time to give each other updates, I realize that we need a different position, a chief diversity officer whose mandate spans any organizational lines. Nothing is out of bounds for him. And I do expect he'll be much more publicly visible. Well, I know he will be, for instance, issuing weekly reports to the campus community on our progress.
So you mentioned this earlier a little bit, you touched on it, but since the October 21st Free Speech Rock protest, POC at IC has largely refused to engage with dialogue with you or anybody else really in administration. How do you plan to move forward with the things that are in this plan for the Chief Diversity Officer to do without necessarily having their input or that two-way conversation?
That is a fair description of their stance, and my personal preference would be that we move forward with their insight. I deeply empathize with and agree with the statement that it's not their problem to solve. And I don't feel that engaging and offering insight is the same as saying, help me solve this problem or identify the solution. However, they're in a different place on that, and I respect that. We do have a lot of people engaging and offering their thoughts, both publicly through the website and privately in terms of people reaching out to me and to Dr. Richardson to offer maybe face-to-face or maybe via email their insights. And we're incorporating all of the collaboration that is offered to us. And a great deal of collaboration is being offered to us in thinking about how to make these steps effective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So going forward with this new plan, because at the A&E Center event you did announce that both Blue Sky and IC 2020 are more or less put on hold until we can figure all this out. Has that made your role and your job difficult, having now kind of three plans up in the air, one more so in the foreground and the other two kind of just in the background now on hold? Has that made things difficult for you and your job as president?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but let me, so if I miss, repose. I feel that setting on hold, not more or less on hold, new initiatives in IC 2020, any further Blue Sky imagining activities, and further activities in the workforce analysis, that's the third one. That setting them aside has enabled me to devote a great deal of time and energy over the last weeks on an every single day basis to our diversity and inclusion initiatives and action plan. That's been absolutely essential. I set those things on hold because intuitively I felt like it might be hard to just have a fourth sleeve of activity at the leadership level. Now that I've been in this for several weeks since then, that was the right decision. So it does not, putting it on hold does not make my job more difficult, it actually makes it possible in this time.
And again, about the goals and things, a lot of students have said that they're not immediate enough, that the action-oriented goals aren't immediate enough for them. How would you respond to that?
Well, I just accept that critique and that sense of timeline. These goals are actually phrased in a way that is very ambitious, especially if we take the viewpoint that the activities, take some of the educational activities for faculty, for staff, and so forth. Those aren't just pro forma, check the box activities. They will be a complete waste of time and money unless they lead to an increased cross-cultural competence and a real change in the environment. For example, a real change in the ability to intervene effectively if you see bias-related comments made in your environment, in your classroom or someone standing next to you or whatever. So given that, we have to do this right. It's not just about doing it, it's about doing it right. We could have a training next week and mandate that all staff go if that was the objective, but that's not the objective. It's to make a difference. And with that understanding, this is actually a very aggressive timeline, and I know that some people will disagree.
So the idea is to kind of make them not necessarily roll out as soon as possible to make sure that they're effective when they do roll out.
Yes, and I did just say that, I have to admit, and at the same time, if that meant in the fullness of time, once we've studied every plan that's out there and gotten assessments of what worked on other campuses, I don't want to be that slow either. We're going to take some chances, and I'm sure we'll do some things that aren't very effective, and quite likely our first trainings won't be what they look like 2 or 3 years down the road. So I'm trying to sail a bit of a middle course with a bias, but with a bias toward action sooner rather than later.
So there are student and faculty no confidence votes in progress. Why do you think students and faculty have such little confidence in leadership?
I'll allow students and faculty to address that. I wake up every morning with energy around what can I do today to move forward on the important directions and initiatives for Ithaca College. And lately, that means I wake up every day thinking about diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm. If a significant amount of faculty and students were to vote no confidence in you, would you consider resigning?
If there are no confidence votes, they'll go to the Board of Trustees for consideration and discussion. So it's not, I've set myself outside of the, I'm not regarding this as an electoral campaign period of time. I'm regarding this as a period of time where I want to do the very best job I can do. I don't know if my tenure here will be longer or shorter, and either way, I'm determined to feel really good about what's happening right now and what's happening in the weeks ahead.
Mm-hmm. So you would not consider resigning? You'd have to be removed by the board? Is that? I don't think you gave me the two alternatives you gave me. Either one fits reality. Is that what's?
Right now, I'm giving no consideration to resigning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to speculate as to what would be the information, including the electoral returns, that would cause me to think differently. But no part of me, I can be very clear on this one right now, no small part of me is thinking about resigning right now. I am completely focused on doing what I consider to be a very important job at a crucial moment in Ithaca College history.
And kind of going off of that, from your point of view, how would you evaluate your performance as president since you first got here?
There have been some signal successes, and there have been some things that I would do differently. There would be some things I wouldn't even try to do to begin with. And that probably is about par for the course for a leadership period, especially that is marked by great needs for change. I could dive under those categories a little bit and offer examples if you wished, but in the big picture, that's how I feel about it. One learns on the job. One learns partly from experience, but one also learns just from the job itself. Mm-hmm. And there are things that even if I didn't know how they had come out before, in other words, even if it wasn't hindsight, I would do differently from the beginning now just because I'm a more experienced president. But all in all, if there was one bottom line statement, I feel that Ithaca College has come a remarkable distance, and a great many things have happened. Essentially none of them due to me alone, because that's not what leadership is, but much of it due to me setting a tone and pointing in certain directions and asking people to focus their energies on accomplishing certain things.
And if you could actually go in a little bit on specific things, if you were to name, let's say your two biggest successes and your two biggest things that you would do differently or regret.
Okay, good. But let me think about them for a second. It's a great question. Mm-hmm. Actually, one of the successes. Now, again, not my success. Mm-hmm. One of the successes on my watch, in which I had some hand, was the creation of the integrative core curriculum. My first day in office was July 1, 2008. The Middle States accrediting body, which makes us eligible for federal financial aid and is kind of important, wrote a letter to Ithaca College that was date stamped June 30th, 2008. In other words, one day, as coming into the office, one day before I started, that said that in light of our last 10-year review, they had concluded that we had a number of serious deficiencies, including the lack of a core curriculum that met the standards of accreditation, and the lack of any sense of what the outcomes of that curriculum were, or measurement that the outcomes were achieved. This is a really serious matter. And the way we were structured, with authority resting in 5 schools, creating a college-wide core curriculum was practically outside of our organizational possibilities, just institutionally. So we not only had to create a curriculum, but we had to create an institutional process for reviewing and approving a curriculum, college-wide, which we didn't have. The curriculum that was created, which was created by faculty, not by me, all I could say was, we need to do something on this, and we need to do it immediately, is a very ambitious curriculum. It's not minimalist at all, and I know not all students are appreciative of it. My theory is they will be when they're alumni, but we'll see. That curriculum required faculty to create or significantly revise more than 300 courses that were delivered across campus. A huge amount of work. And our faculty engaged in that willingly and with enthusiasm. Some dissent, but a great deal of enthusiasm. That just says volumes about our faculty. But it also, I feel a great point of pride around the fact that we addressed a serious deficiency at Ithaca College, and addressed it in a way that didn't just meet accreditation requirements in a minimalist way, but is actually, as far as I can tell, a unique curriculum around the country for helping students make connections between how you think like a scientist, how you think like a social scientist, how you think like a humanist, and how you think like an artist. And that's exciting. That almost stands out head and shoulders above many other things. We have now a diversity requirement in our core curriculum. Very few colleges and universities have that. And I think that the quality of the courses in that requirement, the quality in terms of impact on cross-cultural competence will just grow over time as we get more experience teaching required diversity courses. So on the accomplishments, I probably should think outside the curriculum, but those are two things that jump to mind very quickly. Was your other, what would be some things I would do differently? I live in terror of the idea that on my gravestone someday will be the sentence, "He tried to make a flying squirrel the Ithaca College mascot." Maybe enough said. The motivation for finding a mascot for Ithaca College was really a student-centered motivation. In fact, any number of students said to me they feel that there's not as much spirit on campus as they expected to see when they came here as they would like. And they didn't all say a mascot's the solution, but any number of them said, wouldn't it be great if we had a mascot who showed up at events and just kind of enlivened the thing? And I thought they were right. The one thing that I put on it as a restriction was I did not want a militaristic mascot. It just would not be acceptable to me personally. And I was willing to put down my presidential foot to that extent. After that, I left the process wide open, but the process took us in some slightly weird directions and ultimately collapsed. And I think I might take that one on again, but I would do it so differently if I were to do it again. I'm sure I could think of other. Sorry, it's a great question, and if there's some other significant deficit that I really should be mentioning at this moment, you know, I mean, I've already said. So to come back to one of our themes, that we had an increasingly diverse student body, that the diversity among faculty and staff has not changed as quickly, mm-hmm. and that you know, kind of a culture gap has grown over time. Of course, I wish we had addressed that sooner, though at the same time, I have to tell you that had I taken the initiative to point to that even 2 years ago, I'm not sure I'm not sure the campus was ready to hear that that was an issue and was ready to embrace that as mm-hmm. something we need to work on the way they are right now. So I can say that I wish I had tackled it earlier, but I'm not convinced that I would have been able to get the traction. It's really not about but that, say, our leadership plans would not have been able to get the traction that we are getting now.
Mm-hmm. So did you consider tackling it earlier, or is this more of an in retrospect kind of idea?
Of course, there's been conversation about microaggressions on mm-hmm. campus for several years now. I had been looking for a number of years for the kind of angle into the topic that would allow for constructive leadership. Again, since I reject the idea that I can change that myself, I didn't think about what would I do that would change it by myself. It just doesn't even seem like a promising way to think about it. So what would be a constructive angle into it? And I never found that constructive angle until more recently. So the short answer is yes, I've been thinking about this as an important campus issue. But one, as a leader, you take on the things that you believe you can mobilize others to make a difference on.
Well, that being said, the campus climate survey mm-hmm. that was put out in fall of 2012,
yes. Yeah.
As we all know, as we've reported on, and you're right. fully aware, there was not a lot of immediate action taken on that. Right. It did take until 2014 right. to come out, and when we saw it, it showed that in 2012, a number of Alana students, faculty, and staff have the same kind of feeling that do now, and that they were just less vocal about it. Mm-hmm. Could you at all respond on that, or again on why it took right. so long?
Well, there's an instance, and maybe that deserves to be elevated to my top two regrets. Now I'm kind of regretting that you asked me about top two regrets, because what doesn't get included could be questioned. But there's an element that I wish we had tackled differently. Mm-hmm. And I made a mistaken judgment there in 2012. The judgment was this. That survey was so important to us that I wanted a high quality analysis, not an analysis that simply says, among white students, among students of color, break it out in various groups. This percentage said everything's okay, this percentage was in between, this percentage said things need to be better. That analysis is easy to do. That you can do practically overnight. I felt that we needed something much more thoroughgoing to really understand where our issues are and what kinds of things might we do to tackle those issues. Mm. Unfortunately, in that case, I allowed the perfect to get in the way of the good. And a significant part of the delay was us trying to figure out, well, who will do that better analysis? Where do we have that capacity on campus? And there things sat for probably about a year and a half without any action. At a certain point, you feel more pressure. Well, if we're going to release it now, it has to be an even better analysis. At a certain point, we simply kind of cut the cord. So the one thing that is not true is that anyone, including me, knew the results of the survey and were sitting on them for a period of time. It's more accurate to say we didn't know the results of the survey, but wanted to get a much more high quality analysis that would actually be actionable, would lead to thoughts about what we should do, rather than simply, oh, look at this, these are what the percentages are. If I had to do that one again, I would do it exactly the way we're doing it right now. We've hired an external firm to come onto campus, consult with people, design the survey, administer the survey, analyze the survey. So the issues around finding the capacity to do an analysis no longer arise on campus.
So the survey was done in 2012, but no one even looked at the results until 2015?
I don't know that no one looked at the results, but there was never a compiled report that I'm aware of, because people were aware that the report that I wanted was going to be much more than in statistics, the marginal frequencies or the percentages kind of report.
So when were you made aware of the results of the campus climate survey?
Oh, as it was released. I was part of the, maybe I got it 24 hours in advance, I'm really not sure, but I was basically part of the release.
And now just to tie it back to what's going on here again, right now, in the now, a lot of public response at admissions events to POC at IC has been for the administration to kind of embrace what they're doing, to put out flyers and pamphlets for prospective students and their parents saying that, we know these demonstrations are going on, feel free to speak to them, like don't be afraid or anything like that. But many people have seen that as, instead of an attempt to collaborate with the movement, it is in fact more of an attempt to manipulate that message as a move to make the college look better. How would you respond to that criticism?
Knowing Gerard Turbide and the enrollment group, I know that that's completely not true. There are two things that they're trying to do. One is simply to prepare people. If a student comes up to you and rusts a copy of the Ithacan at you or another flyer, that's what this is about. And I think that's only respectful to prepare people for what they might encounter. And the other is to make a very genuine statement that we embrace the energy and the dialogue that is being created, which comes back to the very first point that I made, that I think that energy and that commitment is making possible the moment that we're in right now. And I realize that POC at IC sees it differently. They have different objectives, after all, of what they're trying to accomplish. My objective is changing the climate on campus as soon and as significantly as possible. And that energy is helping us meet that objective.
And do you think any of this stuff will affect enrollment, either positively or negatively?
I don't know.
That's right. And this goes back again to the Blue Sky event. Many students at the college are calling for the administration, the college as a whole, to cut ties with Christopher Birch in response to the events that happened that day and what he said. Are there any plans to do anything like that?
Yeah, I've heard that, and I am actually not sure what cut ties with an alum means. It could mean revoke that individual's degree. Well, we're not going to do that. It could mean declare that we no longer consider this person to be an alum. We're not going to do that. I've been really clear in my belief that the comments were deeply inappropriate. They were insensitive. I know, not only because I know Chris Birch, but also because I've kind of reviewed the video, that he did not mean them to be offensive. He was actually trying to compliment her. But to be so, that doesn't change anything. It alters the, the diagnosis of what went wrong, but it doesn't change the outcome. I absolutely dissociate the college from those comments and from feeling that that's an appropriate way to refer to someone else, especially a person of color, but really anybody. That's as far as I'll go on that. I'm sorry. What was the verb again that you? It's
cut ties.
Cut ties with. I'm just not in the business of cutting ties with people. I don't know. That itself is different from the kind of respectful but clear discourse that is important. I've said to Chris Birch directly what I've just said here and elsewhere about my feeling about the inappropriateness of those comments, and my feeling that you need to be more sensitive than that. So it's not that I'm trying to have things two ways with two audiences. That's what I've done.
I think the idea behind cutting ties is financially cutting ties, so not accepting donations. With that in mind, would you?
I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Could you clarify?
Meaning, I don't believe that, well, I don't know if Chris Birch has donations to offer at the college in the future.
Mhm. But if he were to offer a donation, would you accept it?
Look, let's back up a step.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Birch himself apologized to Tatiana Sai that evening when he was informed how his comments had come across, in person, face to face, and subsequently again in a phone call. Now, I wasn't part either of the face-to-face conversation or the phone call, so I'm not going to represent how that apology was or was not accepted. That to me is, however, the fact that those conversations did happen is far more important than whether someone is eligible to donate to Ithaca College in a way that will be of benefit to future students.
And knowing that those conversations did happen, did that at all play with how the college responded? Because one of the big criticisms that's going on right now is the length of time that it took the college to respond to those criticisms compared to the issue with AEPI and the time difference.
Right. And I understand those optics. There were two different processes and two different sets of people involved in composing things. I'm trying to remember who issued the AEPI statement. I know that that wasn't mine. I didn't issue that one. There's another way to look at it, which is that the AEPI statement was put together very quickly because we hoped to prevent by the statement, or not prevent, but forestall the party even happening. And I don't know that our statement made a difference, but I like to think that it helped, and as you know, the party did not happen. So that had a very serious timeline attached to it because the party was going to be the next day, I think the Saturday. We worked over the weekend on the Chris Birch statement. That one did come out in my name alone, or my name?
I think it was you and Provost
Yeah.
Rifkin,
And it might seem odd that I don't know that. I always have a hand in the early drafting, in the middle drafting, and the later drafting, and absolutely final approval. But a lot of other people offered their thoughts on what that should say and how it should say it. And we worked through the weekend, but those processes led to the timing that they led to. I guess if I want to bring any slightly different perspective, so I understand the feeling that, it's quick when it's a student party, it's slow when it's a donor to the college. That wasn't actually the set of relevant considerations. One consideration was we were very quick on the party because there was a timeline issue, and the other one happened to be slower because there were more people involved in sharing their thoughts. And it spanned a weekend. Not that people took the weekend off, but you can't meet face to face, and it took a little more time. Doesn't change the optics, but it does in fact change the considerations that led to the outcome.
Another common criticism we've been hearing from faculty and students is that you don't ask for advice often enough, and you don't listen to it when it's given. How do you respond to an idea brought up by students and faculty that you are tone deaf sometimes?
A criticism that general, disconnected from any context, is not something I can know how to respond to.
Another criticism is that there's a lot of administrative turnover. How do you respond to that idea?
Referring to, I've heard often the comment about 5 provosts, of which 2 were interim provosts. And one was a provost inherited from the prior administration. The provost-president relationship is a very individual and important thing, so it's actually far more common than not that a provost inherited from a prior administration does move on to another job. So if you eliminate interim provosts and inherited provosts, we're now on our second provost. I'm not trying to play with numbers or manipulate it here, but my point is that counting 5, including 2 interims, who by design were in the job for 1 year, is also a bit of a manipulative count.
So with all the calls from faculty and students about no confidence in you, do you have confidence in yourself to be an effective president of Ithaca College?
What a good question. And the answer is, if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. A great deal has happened in the time that I've been here. I've had some leadership successes. I've had some leadership failures. And I do have a great deal of confidence that I am a good fit for Ithaca College and that I'm there for the future. There's only one relevant voice on that, and I want to be real clear, which is the Board of Trustees. But since you're asking me, I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying the Board of Trustees is the only relevant voice on confidence in you?
The final decision-making
Mm-hmm.
voice.
Okay.
Thank you for asking for that clarification.
I just got the wave from Amanda that we're over time. Sorry if you had like maybe one more question.
Okay.
Just in general, how are you feeling about everything that's going on?
This is a very intense time, and it's a time of opportunity. There are any number of, and I've focused on, I think, the opportunity that's in front of us. I would say there are any number of things to worry about. One thing that I'm deeply worried about is the tone that has been taken toward POC at IC in the last 24, 48 hours in particular. It seems to be happening. I'd be dishonest with you if I didn't say I anticipated that a little bit. We've seen that on other campuses too. But and dissent is expected, but the language that has been used, the threatening language, the racist language, is just so deeply wrong and completely unacceptable and concerning. It makes the point about the culture that POC at IC is describing, even though some of it is coming from off campus, but some of it is not coming from off campus. And we have a very clear expectation in our student code of conduct and in our staff and faculty policy manuals about how we will treat each other and how we will talk to each other and how we will deal with each other. And many of these comments that I've been seeing on social media are clearly way beyond what is acceptable or permitted under those policies. So we have right now some very serious examination to do of those comments. We have got to get that aspect of it back on track. There is an opportunity here for a difficult but ultimately a fruitful dialogue around the kind of climate we want to create, the kind of relationships we want to build with each other. But there is also the risk, if untended, that in fact we'll end up with a climate that is worse than what we have today. And that's something I'm right now at this moment very focused on.
Mm-hmm. This kind of ties back to a question we posed earlier, but do you think this dialogue is possible without the input of POC at IC, especially considering yesterday's rally, which had approximately 1,000 participants?
Many of those participants are in fact in dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I looked out over the crowd and saw people who I've had individual meetings with and very productive conversations with in even the 24 or 48 hours prior to the rally. So we have to not, I understand the point about POC
Mm-hmm.
at IC saying that they don't want any dialogue, but you cannot generalize that to all rally participants, far
Mm-hmm.
from it. I do wish, if I could rule the universe, that POC at IC would offer participation in dialogue. It's their decision, obviously, and I believe I understand where they're coming from. But we're not going to wait, we're just not going to wait until that happens. And I think the very rollout of the action plan at the A&E Center, even though in some ways that's already a while ago and we're moving quickly from there, shows that we're not planning to wait.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.